Thank you, Spencer. It is now 10 minutes after the hour. There is a new book on AIDS, written by a man who has lost many friends to the epidemic. And he writes in this book, no one is in charge of this pandemic, either in this city or this state or this country. It is as simple as that. Almost every person connected with running the AIDS show everywhere is second-rate. And I'm telling you, they are killing us. The book is Reports from the Holocaust, the making of an AIDS activist. And the writer is Larry Kramer, controversial novelist, playwright, and AIDS activist. He's here with us this morning. Also with us, former U.S. Senator Lowell Weiker, who was very involved in AIDS issues on Capitol Hill. He's now president of Research America, a nonprofit organization that seeks to educate Americans about medical research. Nice to have you both with us. This is a very angry book that you have written. Is it really based, are things as bad as you say they are, or is it just frustration that people haven't been able to locate and find a cure fast?
No, I think both. I think, quite frankly, the epidemic is now totally out of control. The CDC just reported that 1 out of 300 college kids is now infected. That's a pretty scary statistic.
And you say no one really cares, is what you're saying.
And not only don't they care, you have the feeling that the whole sense of urgency has been lost. We know Reagan didn't care, and so far George Bush doesn't care either. I gather the First Lady is on after us, and I appeal to you, Mrs. Bush. This is a terrible situation. You have college kids. You have an Hispanic daughter-in-law. The Hispanic community has been terribly hurt. Have your husband put someone in charge. 1 week in office, he had an AIDS, a drug czar. We've been asking for an AIDS czar for 8 years. The man who's titularly in charge, Dr. Fauci, whom your husband has called a hero, is quite frankly in way over his head. He is not competent enough as an administrator to deal with this pandemic now so woefully out of control.
Senator, do you think the kind of broad indictment that Larry writes is justified?
I think it's justified. I think two things you said in your introduction. He's lost many friends. Indeed, many people have been lost in this country to AIDS, and really to an uncaring country in many ways. Number two, he said nobody's in charge. Ronald Reagan did many things, but his handling of AIDS really is one of the low points in his career, and I would hope also personally. So I come to the point where, what do we do, and who are the players that can make a difference? Where probably Larry and I disagree is I worked very closely with Tony Fauci to go ahead and get the money to get AZT on with its clinical trials. You had a situation where the president was walking away from AIDS, yet the people at NIH, Fauci, Weingarten, etc., were willing, in effect, to stand up against that president on the subject of AIDS and work with the Congress, because it was the Congress that went ahead and kept on doubling the amounts for AIDS, even while the administration wouldn't do anything. Do I blame him for being angry? Listen, if it were my friends that were dying, I'd be just as mad as he is. And indeed, to see a nation which never before asked, how did you get sick, say, we want to know how you got sick before we're going to help you. Listen, I think that's a terrible indictment of all of us.
But you talk about the need for a czar in this area, somebody to coordinate the efforts, etc. The question is, what would different avenues, could different avenues really make a difference? There's drugs.
There are so many promising drugs in the pipeline that we simply cannot get a hold of. The senator talks of AZT. That's the last time Dr. Fauci opened his mouth, as far as anyone can see. He's been shamed on the floor of Congress by Senator Kennedy for sitting on a good dozen drugs that you can get in other countries if you're rich, but you can't get here. It is shocking that a cure is just around the corner, and we cannot get these people to test the drugs. I personally think that the National Institutes of Health is the biggest waste of taxpayer money short of the Pentagon.
Is it really just around the corner?
Well, first of all, let me stand up for the National Institutes of Health.
This is allies.
This is life. This is life. It's not the business of death. The business of life. That's the National Institutes of Health.
But we have something here that is transmissible, that is going around. We do not have time for business as usual. It started in the gay community when I get involved. I am telling you now that 1 out of 300 college kids is now infected. These are not gay kids and these are not drug kids. Doesn't that mean, Mommy and Daddy in America, that you've got to do something?
Look, Larry, go get them. I'm 100% with you. You and I aren't going to fight. But during this battle in Congress, You even had senators saying, let's not educate the American people on how you get AIDS for fear of teaching them promiscuity. Now, mind you, education is the only tool we have immediately at hand to prevent people from contracting AIDS. And yet the United States Senate went on record twice as to throttling the Centers for Disease Control from educating the American people. And I saw where just yesterday, Cardinal Law in Boston doesn't want education of the Roman Catholic community in Boston for fear of teaching promiscuity. Listen, there's no second chance. There's no second chance. You either tell people how they get AIDS or they're dead.
But to raise these kind of objections, to talk about the way you do, is to indicate perhaps that some magic corner could be turned if we just did X or Y or Z.
No question.
Is there any evidence that there is a magic corner there?
There are 2, 3, 4, 5 drugs now that are so promising. One called Compound Q, which a man in San Francisco has discovered with a Chinese doctor. It's based on the root of the Chinese cucumber. We are hearing things about
But is that grasping at straws, Larry?
No, because it has already proved effective. What's not proved effective is the man who's in charge of the test, Dr. Volberding, who has inhumanely decided he could only going to test it in one person. This is a drug that has been in use for 1,700 years.
I think there's a time gap here. 5 years ago, we didn't have the resources out there to pursue new drugs or vaccines or whatever. We're now at a $1.6 billion budget, and we're finally marshaling our resources. We're finally saying, look, let's err on the side of trying new drugs. I think we've gone through a transformation, but I'll tell you, we're never, and here again is where Larry's right, we're never going to do everything that can be done until the president leads the effort. That is going to be required of George Bush.
The book is Reports from the Holocaust. Larry Kramer, the author. Thank you for being with us. Lowell Weiker, thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
17 minutes after.